Hello. This isn't my channel, but the door was open, so I thought I might as well just...
Excuse me, what are you doing in here?
Oh, nothing, just...
Were you about to make a FNaF theory?
Definitely not. I already put out one of those today, so I'm just...
Yeah, we don't do those around here anymore, champ. This channel's been FNaF free for, 2 weeks.
Oh, come on. One theory video is not too much to ask.
Get out of my house, dude.
Fine. But I'll be back. I always come back.
Thanks for getting them out of my house, Mimic. I can't stand confrontation. During the first week of August, we saw a ton of FNaF-related content get announced or straight up come out. But one piece of that event that we didn't get a lot out of was the Steel Wool announcement. We got a quick teaser showing us a seemingly new character emerging from a puppet box with the year 1979 scrolling by, as well as a title, Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. I don't care what you say, this title slaps. Anyway, since then we've had various ideas, theories, and speculations on what Secret of the Mimic will actually be like. And today I think I have an answer, but it's one you'll have to bear with me on. For the most part, RyeToast, a fellow theorist, and myself have come to somewhat similar conclusions on what we think this next game is going to be. But one thing we don't really agree on is how the available evidence should be interpreted. What available evidence? The Tales from the Pizzaplex book series, a series which may give us all the answers or be pointing us towards something a bit different. Personally speaking, I've always been on the side that these books were made to exist within continuity of the games, whereas Rye historically believed them to be parallels of the real story. So what is the Secret of the Mimic? What do we have to work on? Well, let's lay out what we have to work with and then I'll try to piece it together. Let's start with that first teaser trailer. This teaser doesn't tell us a whole lot about what the game will actually be like and is more so a reveal of this particular character here. Given the eyes match the Mimic's in-game textures in Ruin for when it was meant to wear these individual costumes, most of us immediately gravitated towards this character being the Mimic. I mean, it's even in the title. And since this would appear to be our main antagonist, more on that later, I do still believe this. It's worth pointing out that this design takes cues from all over the place. If we are to believe the books, this may even be the Jester costume that was described based on the full body reveal later. I'm actually not certain that this is the case though, given how clown-like it is, rather than Jester-like. It also has a noticeable crease down the middle of its face, something that is a specific design detail native to the Funtime animatronics, who also had a clown aesthetic for the most part. So is this some new Funtime design? Possibly, but we'll have to keep that idea to the side for now. Instead, let's move on to the other two big details that spawn from this trailer. The first being the music. It's the grandfather clock, which, when combined with the image of a box like this, definitely invokes strong connections to one specific character, the puppet. This is another character who is clown-like in appearance, and appears out of a wind-up box that plays my grandfather clock. So for now, let's just make a note that this character has some sort of tie to the puppet that we don't know yet. And the final detail is the year. This is the earliest date in the timeline yet, aside from a Fall Fest poster which came even earlier in 1970. And it's been theorized that this would be the next location the FNaF series would bring us. And this was all we had to work with for some time. But then Pax West happened. At PAX this year, Steel Wool made a big splash with the FNaF series, even bringing out a stage reminiscent of the one from Pizza Sim, as well as some great cosplay of characters like Freddy and Roxy. But we don't care about that right now, I'm sorry Regular Sauce, another day. For now, we're gonna actually be focusing on some of the absolutely huge reveals this event had for Secrets of the Mimic. The first thing we'll be talking about is this huge reveal, courtesy of Dako. This would appear to be the full body of the character from the teaser trailer. Rumored and then confirmed by Regular Sauce, this is Jackie, a female clown animatronic, who seems to be a Jack-in-the-Box. I think it's worth noting though that this does not entirely match the animatronic from the teaser. The original one that we saw didn't have these cartoony plastic eyes, but instead the orange Mimic ones, and it didn't have that hat that Jackie wears. It may not have even had the hair, but it's a bit too dark to tell. On top of all of this, it is visually way more scuffed up than Jackie here. So what does this mean? Let me get back to that later on. For now, let's talk about the demo. Now, unfortunately, I am not ridiculously wealthy, nor do I have all the time in the world, so I was not able to go to PAX myself. However, those who did were able to play a demo of Secrets of the Mimic that shines a lot of light onto what this game will actually be like. Some of it I found very interesting, and some of it I found a little bizarre. According to Coda, a person who was present and played the game, the setting was a toy factory. Something just incredibly bizarre to me given that one of the FNaF series' biggest competitors right now, Poppy Playtime, is set in Toy Factory. But then I thought, well, maybe it's a factory and Coda just called it a toy factory. After all, the way Coda goes on to describe it seems very much like Poppy Playtime Chapter 1. But keep that location in mind, it's a factory, possibly a toy factory. They also describe processes like vent chases, winding the music box, and being chased by Jackie. What Coda did not provide in his description, however, was what Jackie looked like, whether it was more in line with the Jackie we see at PAX or the Jackie in the teaser. Other sources I've seen have said that it more so resembles the Jackie seen in the teaser, with the one present at PAX being its initial appearance before it ever actually chases you. And more suspiciously, it's a chase scene, but Jackie doesn't have legs. I have also heard that it apparently yanks itself out of the puppet box, but details on that are scarce right now. I suppose it could actually be like the Dog Day chase in Poppy 3, and that's getting way too close to Poppy territory for me, so I'm just saying. Maybe the real secret of the Mimic was their endorsement of plagiarism. I mean, wouldn't really be that far off from real AI. But aside from this, Coda also mentions that there's a schematic for a mascot version of Mr. Hippo. A really interesting idea, and one that may line up with a super bizarre theory I have. The next thing I want to do is look at some pictures that were taken at the demo booth. This first one shows what seems to be a camera layout. It does line up with the factory setting, but there's some details I want to point out in specific. First off is this camera, which seems to have some kind of carousel on it. Carousels have been sort of important to the FNaF series as of late, so we could probably expect something out of this. Next is this top right camera featuring a long hallway and a shadow that really interests me, and I want to see within the context of the game. This appears to be one of the mascot costumes, similar to what was seen in Ruin, which makes me believe that in this instance we are seeing the Mimic roaming while wearing one of these suits. In the bottom right camera though, we see a sign that says Big Top on it, again connecting this game to a sort of circus theme. It's a little hard to make out what it says otherwise, but hey, what can you really do? We'll talk more on that circus theme later as well, I promise, just wait until we run through everything, okay champ? The last thing I want to touch on is again from Coda's description, but it ties in more with the setting. He mentions there being Fredbear's Family Diner posters like the ones from Security Breach. That on its own is nothing special, but let's look into this a little further. We have Fredbear posters from Security Breach in this factory from 1979. A factory most closely related to the Mimic. I think you can see where that's leading me, but for now let me recap what I think is happening in Secrets of the Mimic, from the perspective of a Tales Games believer. Hopefully we don't have some sort of uninvited guest, that would be awful, truly awful. In fact, I could probably kill the next person to show up in this video uninvited, but hey, that would never happen, right? Anyway. Here's what I believe is happening. Let's start with Jackie. The first thing that stood out to me was the lack of legs she has. This coincides with the Mimic as presented in the Tales from the Pizzaplex short story, The Mimic. This short story takes place in the factory in which the Mimic was built, and it was initially created as the top half of an endoskeleton. If Jackie here is our Mimic, which it definitely seems she might be, then that lines up. But more than this, is there anywhere else Jackie may have shown up before in the series? Well, let's talk sister location and springlock suits. Since we know that this would be around the time springlocks are still actively being used, and the Mimic specifically wears springlock suits at different points, I want to point out how closely Jackie's face matches up with the sister location Night 4 suit. This is a springlock suit with design elements from the fun times, such as the opening faceplates. Now, Jackie's design is not 100% accurate to the Night 4 suit if that is to be the case, but I think it's very possible. I'd also like to point out that this is a suit Scott Cawthon specifically did not want to comment on in the first interview with Dawko. It could very well be that this is Jackie. Further, the mysterious paper pal from FNaF 2, the one that doesn't match any character in that game. I think most of us agree now that it mostly resembles Jackie, especially when you compare the ribbon-like arms that Jackie has to the paper pal. But there's another character Jackie has a strong tie to we really have to talk about. The puppet. I think it's very interesting that the first time we ever saw Jackie, they were quite literally rang in as the puppet, emerging from a music box playing the same classic tune we've been hearing since FNaF 2. But for all intents and purposes, this character is not the puppet as far as we know, nor is the Mimic. So what's the connection? Well, this may take some good old-fashioned hearing me out, but let me explain. I tried very hard to think of some kind of connection between the Mimic and the puppet, but it's not quite that simple. The Mimic is not the puppet, nor is the puppet the Mimic. But then I remembered our good friends at the Pizzaplex, the staff bots. These staff bots are the most common enemy you'll encounter in Security Breach, and as I've pointed out before alongside many others, they are very similar in design to the puppet. Note the tear streaks, spindly limbs, and cheek blush. However, the Nightmare staff bots resemble the puppet even more than the originals, or rather, Nightmarian. These are the staff bots that surround the Mimic's hiding spot, and the ones who exist deep beneath the actual Pizzaplex. So what, you may be asking, what does this matter? Well, also consider one of the most bizarre Easter eggs that never really had an explanation. until now, these Nightmarian plushies. In the past, I've written these off as just spooky set dressing, another set of eyes to watch over the player's back. But what if they really are more than that? They're the Mimic's calling cards, the message that says I'm watching. So maybe the puppet itself isn't the Mimic, but Nightmarian is. Or at the very least, the concept of the Nightmarian. The idea of there being an evil version of the puppet. What I'm about to propose might be unusual, but I think I'm on the right track. What if the puppet is a Mimic? Think about it like this. Edwin Murray creates the Mimic and abandons it in the factory he created it in. Fazbear Entertainment acquires the Mimic 1 code and makes a new line of animatronics, and these animatronics are puppets. They're security guards. They learn and mimic their human trainers. This is what the security puppet is. It's a Mimic that has been taught how to protect Charlotte Emily. This even explains what the phone guy means in FNaF 2 when he says he doesn't like the puppet because it's always thinking. He doesn't like it because it thinks and moves like it has a mind of its own. And do tell me, what is the given reason for the Mimics being shut down from the Tales books? They acted human in ways that were not intended. This would even explain why the puppet is so different from the other animatronics. The others have a very simple AI, but the puppet is capable of learning. This is what makes Charlie such a strong entity. It's piggybacking off of a really strong AI. So Jackie, or the Mimic, is what happens when the program learns to do bad things. It learned pain and it learned anger. And the cherry on top of this weird pie or cake thing I made is this. Aside from Jackie, what was the other animatronic prop made for the PAX booth? The puppet. I think the connection is there. The Mimic, Nightmarian, Jackie, they're all the same entity, an anti-puppet. Weird phrase, I'm not going to change it though, moving on. The next thing I want to touch on is the circus theming. Just what is up with that? Is it really related to Fall Fest, or is this like the third time in a row we thought something Fall Fest was coming and got blueballed? And yet again, I'm gonna need to ask that you hear me out. A while back now, Funko released a line of plushies, mystery minis, and pop figures that were all part of one specific line. Balloon Circus. This line consisted of much more cartoony, stylized versions of the FNaF characters we all know, all themed around the circus or themed after Balloon Boy. The thing is that it was never clear what this line was meant for. One common theory was that they were just Funko OCs, but that didn't add up once Balloon Freddy was found being sold on non-Funko merchandise at Hot Topic. So these were, for all intents and purposes, official FNaF characters without a game attached to them. Or at least, not one we'd seen yet. When comparing the designs of the circus characters to those of the mascot costumes or Jackie herself, I think it becomes much more plausible that these circus figures are Mimic suits. Envision that, a Five Nights at Freddy's game where one threat, the Mimic, is wearing different costumes based on these circus characters to chase you. It would retroactively make all of these circus characters the Mimic, and I'm not going to complain on that. But more importantly, it would give them somewhere to exist within the canon. Since we do see evidence of a circus theme in the factory, that's what I'm leaning towards at the moment. This, however, is mostly speculation on my end, and admittedly is me just trying to fit the circus characters into the game somehow. But truly, if there ever was a game these guys could fit in, I think it's this one. Next, I want to touch on that Mr. Hippo schematic. I just think it's very interesting that it seems like Mr. Hippo may have started out as a mascot costume for Fazbear, and it would explain why he seems to be the only mediocre melody that Fazbear actually still cares about by the time of Security Breach. And it also got me thinking, if Mr. Hippo started as a mascot costume that the Mimic could wear, what does that mean for the ending of Security Breach where Glamrock Mr. Hippo arrives? Call me crazy, but maybe in this ending, that's actually just the Mimic, coming back as Glamrock Mr. Hippo. Just some food for thought. And also on the topic of what the Mimic was doing during Security Breach, I think those posters from Fredbear's Family Diner being in the same factory as the Mimic kinda ties the Mimic to these posters definitively, meaning that the sticky note room where one of the posters is found is almost definitely Mimic based and not Afton based as many of us suspected. But whatever, that's still speculation. And all of that is said and good, but I'm still not done. All of what I've said before could be guessed on and surmised based on what we see in the actual games, but what separates this video from the one on Rye's channel, aside from my handsome voice, is going to be an unraveling the actual story of the game. As I said before, Jackie being an animatronic without legs being piloted by the Mimic is very, very telling to me. What do I think this game is going to be? I think it's going to be the missing chapter of the Mimic's origin story. In the Tales from the Pizzaplex book series, when the Mimic is first created by Edwin, he's created for one express purpose: to watch over his son, David. Edwin's a busy guy, helping with the construction of animatronics from the factory in which they're created. In fact, Edwin lives at this factory. However, when David is hit by a car, Edwin finally breaks. He catches the Mimic still imitating his son and decides to beat it with a metal rod. Specifically, I'd like to point out when Edwin starts to beat the Mimic, it's because the mimic asked him for ice cream while mimicking David. Jackie during the demo apparently makes some references to ice cream, which further supports that this is the mimic. It's at this point that Edwin gives up and abandons the factory with the mimic inside. The next time we see the mimic is when Group A and B from Fazbear are sent in to retrieve it. Specifically, Group B is sent after Group A and finds their bodies completely mangled, with Group A having given the mimic legs. And this, my friends, is where I think the secret of the mimic is going to come into play. Between the initial beating and the mimic killing Group B, we have a pretty undisclosed period of time, with not many details to work with, other than the aftermath. But in my opinion, this is the perfect time slot. Secret of the Mimic, I believe, is going to be happening in that time frame, back at the factory where the Mimic was first created. Now, I'm not saying for certain that the character we play as is going to be part of Group A and give the Mimic their legs, but I do think it's on the table. In any case, I think we were almost definitely there before Group B showed up. This is why it's important, at least to me. I think that the puppet reveal is going to be the secret of the Mimic. Whoever we play as, I think we're going to be the character to recover the Mimic 1 programming, which results in the other mimics being created, i.e. the security puppets. Have you ever wondered why the security puppet looks nothing like the regular puppet despite having the associated minigame attached? I think it's because these puppets both just happen to be part of the same line. They were created, taught to mimic the security staff, and when they failed in a grotesque way that resulted in Charlotte possessing one of them, the entire line was tucked away, with only Charlotte's vessel being spared. I think we're going to be playing out the part of Edwin's story that we don't get to see. We're playing a factory with a legless mimic in the year 1979. I'm just saying, this feels really, really definitive. Oh, hold on. My toast is ready. Fuck, I really set myself up for that one, huh?
The decoy worked, I see. Anyway, this is my house now and I make the rules, and demuted is wrong. Well, okay, strong languages for the purposes of entertainment aside, I think it's more of a toss-up. Cards on the table, I do currently lean towards Tales games being true. That being that Tales from the Pizzaplex stories take place within the game's timeline. But this game really is going to be the make it or break it moment for that theory. Because realistically, if we get any origin for the Mimic in this game and it's not close to what we see in the books, that theory is dead in the water. If it's closely tied to the books or not mentioned at all, Tales Games is good to go, if not stronger for it. But if there are significant deviations, we have to take them into account. And realistically, I see two-ish major issues that could be that breaking point. The first one is the legs thing that's been brought up so far. Sure, we could be taking place at a point in the factory where the Mimic has not received its legs yet. But if we're not, and Fazbear has already reclaimed the Mimic and it still doesn't have legs, we have an issue here. Because by the time Fazbear gets their grubby little hands on this endoskeleton, it's been repaired and given legs. Now again, to be fair, we don't know the context of this game. So it is possible that Fazbear takes the Mimic, and then when they rebrand it as Jackie, since it's still new technology, just to play it safe, they remove its legs so it can't walk around the facility. Totally possible. But from what we know currently, it's equally likely that this is a break in the canon. But here's a bigger and more thorough possible issue here: the spacing of these events. As far as we're aware, in the game's timeline, Henry Emily definitely made the original Freddy Fazbear's band, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. After all, in FNaF 6, he says, "prisons of my making." So if these prisons were made by Henry, he must have done one of two things, or both technically. One, he either killed the children, which caused their spirits to be imprisoned, which we're definitely pretty sure he didn't do that. In fact, we have evidence saying he definitely didn't do that. Or he made the prisons themselves, the animatronic suits. And that lines up with his characterization in the Silver Eyes, the idea that Henry is this technological genius that is able to build these animatronics. So in the game's timeline, we're like 99% sure that Henry built the original Freddy's animatronics. Here's the issue. In the story The Mimic, Edwin is hired by Fazbear to take costumes that are sent to him and turn them into animatronics. In that story, he's actively working on Chica and some of the other characters. When I read this story, and up until this point, I assumed Edwin was making extra animatronics. Like, say there's 2 or 3 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in existence, and they want to open another one and they need a new set of animatronics. That's where Edwin came in. That was my assumption. That made the most sense to me. But at PAX, there's a very important poster in the set dressing: Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, coming soon. Pair that up with the year we get in the Secret of the Mimic teaser, 1979. So let's take the things we know here. If this game takes place in 1979, before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza exists, and whoever made the Mimic in the story also made Freddy Fazbear animatronics, we have one of like 3 options here. Either Edwin was actually the one to originally make the Freddy Fazbear Band, thus massively retconning FNAF 6, something that, while technically possible and doable because of Help Wanted, is something they probably wouldn't want to do. Or 2, this is the game deconfirming Tales games and telling us that in the game's timeline, Henry was the one to also make the Mimic when he made the other Freddy Fazbear's animatronics. And then, to be fair, there's the third option. We know none of the context of this game. So the third option is anything else. It's totally possible that Edwin made these original characters and the Mimic, but then left the company, which we know he does, and when Henry takes over, that's when the Freddy Fazbear's animatronics are finished and fully created by Henry. That's totally possible. We don't know the context here. But from what little specks of information we have one issue we have to contend with. In the books, Edwin is being hired to make Freddy Fazbear animatronics. So if in the books, Edwin is making Freddy and the gang before Freddy Fazbear's exists and is the original creator of them, then either FNAF 6 is fully wrong or Tales Games is dead in the water. And we're just gonna have to wait and find out. Oh god, he's almost back.
Well, that's nice. Unfortunately, it's my video, so I'm probably gonna erase this. Oh, you silly, silly RyeToast, you. Well, that was weird. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I'm really excited for Secrets of the Mimic. It's the first time in a while I've been really excited to talk about FNAF. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.